Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to a special one-hour-long Friday, October 2nd, 2015 edition of Nature of Reality Radio. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, normally broadcasting Wednesdays from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't. We will be doing that on this show to some extent, although this show is a MUFON October 2015 Philadelphia Conference preview, which is actually not being held in Philadelphia. It's actually going to be held in the Langhorne area, I believe at the same hotel that the Free Your Mind 2015 conference was being held. This is a two-day conference on October 9th and October 10th. John Ventre is the head and president of the conference. I believe this is him on the queue here, area code 724. There is no news segment on this show because it's only an hour long, only going until 7 Eastern. So without further ado, John Ventre, area code 742, is that you? 724, is that you? You're on the air.
Yeah, that's me. Thanks for having me back on, Andrew.
You're very welcome. Of course, I usually don't have the same guest on twice because I'm on a mission to keep getting different guests on virtually every single show. But that does not mean guests can't contact me again to do something like a one-hour special, as you did, so I can certainly treat you as a fair and reasonable exception to that. We've only got an hour today. So to start off, I'm going to make this really straightforward and simple. We're going to go through each of the speakers one by one at the conference, and we're going to introduce them, who they are, what they do, and what are going to be some of the important bits and pieces in their presentations. We don't have to spend the whole hour doing this with each guest and giving each guest a specific 10 minutes per guest. If we have 10 minutes per speaker, if we have 5 speakers, I think there's going to be more than that. But I tried to put up the website here for the MUFON PA conference. There really isn't much information here. I think I'm going to have to go to my Gmail page with those emails you sent me to get a better view of what this is about. But while I'm doing that, I'll let you start off in order of appearance when they're going to be speaking. Tell us who each speaker is, one by one. Well, actually, after you finish talking about each speaker, give me a chance to talk. And then we'll just go on to the next speaker. So who's speaking first? Who are they? What do they do? And what will they be discussing as the important bits and pieces in their presentation?
Okay. Well, the conference will start Friday, October 9th at the Sheraton Bucks County, and you can find the information at MUFONPA.com. We start off Friday at 4:30 with a documentary DVD, a new one on the true Travis Walton story, and Jennifer Stein, who is the producer of the documentary, will be there. And they aired this past weekend at the MUFON Symposium in Southern California, and I attended it, and it was very well received. And I got to tell you, this is one of the best documentations I've ever seen. I can't say that word, but this is one of the best ones I've ever seen. It's very accurate, interviewing people that were there, the other lumberjacks that were with him. And so we're going to start off. That's free, and it's open to the public at 4:30. And then at 6, it's Jennifer Stein, who is going to talk about her trip to Göbekli Tepe. So the actual producer of the first segment, after we watch the DVD, will then talk about her trip to Göbekli Tepe, and that's where they have those giant stones that are 1,200 tons. I mean, it's incredible. I've read that they cannot lift those stones with cranes and move them, but yet they were quarried 50 miles away, brought down a river, and placed there. And they were actually then lifted up and placed on other stones that were about 30 feet high. So how did they lift them? How did they move them? And people have gone as far as even like Ancient Aliens saying that this site in Göbekli Tepe was actually a landing pad for E.T. craft, and that's what it was built for. But so now you can comment. That's Jen Stein. She's going to take up the first 4:30 to 6, and then 6 to 7:15.
Okay, just a quick question about regarding Göbekli Tepe. Is she going to spend time speculating on like how maybe Göbekli Tepe was tied into Atlantis, since it said they were around the same time period, or is she basically just going to spend a lot of time talking about how this is constructed by means like technology we've never really seen before? I mean, is it going to be speculation or more based on fact of Göbekli Tepe?
Well, I think she's going to, I know she has a PowerPoint because she was there on Göbekli Tepe with Linda Moulton Howe. They both went there. There was a small party of about 8 people that went there 3 years ago. So she's created a PowerPoint presentation that she's going to show you up close. And, I guess it's all speculation. She may talk about how they moved it and what, what the going theories are, what she thinks happened, but nobody really knows. But it will be a real good presentation on Göbekli Tepe, and you'll see firsthand pictures in her PowerPoint of the actual location.
Awesome. I just want to point out, I remember at the last time I was at your MUFON conference when Linda Moulton Howe was trying to present, since you mentioned her, it took forever for her to finally be able to get her presentation up because there were some glitches in the system. I don't mean to sound crazy and all, but I have heard that from people like Akashic Records reader Andrew Bartzis that it's not uncommon at conferences for entities, aliens, whatever you want to call them, which he refers to as timeline jumpers, trying to sabotage things at conferences to keep information from going out. Not saying that those were the exact technical gremlins that caused Linda Moulton Howe's presentation to not present on time. But I think it's fair for me to ask you, not just for this presenter, but the other ones that we're going to be talking about in a second, have you taken precautions to make sure that does not happen, be it technical gremlins or some other problem that's causing the so-called sabotage or technical problems? Yeah.
Well, one of the things with Linda is she uses Apple and she uses her own laptop, and most everybody else, they'll have it on a thumb drive, or they'll want to upload it to my computer, which is a Toshiba. But so the problems we had with Linda was because it was Apple and we didn't have the right connections. And we had to actually run out and buy a cord and get her connected. And plus she didn't want to stand next to it. She wanted to be 30 feet from it, didn't want to use the mic. So, I mean, there was a bunch of things there with her. But on the good side, we have all of the cables that connect up to the projector and an Apple laptop. And Jennifer herself, I know, uses an Apple. So when she presents her own presentation, she's going to use her own computer, which is an Apple, so we won't have that problem. But I think that as far as my conference goes, the only time I had an issue with Linda was because she was Apple and we didn't have the right cables to run an extended cable for an Apple. But that stuff does happen. I've had a number of conferences that I've spoken, not conferences but radio shows like this one, where I've spoken and twice we lost the signal. I had to call back in. And 3 other times, somebody tried to take the signal down. And on all 5 instances, I was speaking about the Yellowstone supervolcano. It's funny, it's never happened with UFOs, but whenever I speak of the Yellowstone supervolcano, not every time, but, the signal goes down or it gets lost.
That's interesting, and since you point that out, just as a quick side note, I have heard from some people in the ET field that there are ETs out there trying to prevent Yellowstone from exploding, so I guess we can breathe a sigh of relief knowing there are benevolent forces out there who are trying to keep humanity safe from natural disasters. But that's a side issue for a completely different story, different radio show. We got to move on to the other speakers here at this conference. Have I ever heard of this guy? Ted Buffington. His subject will be NASA and UFOs. Well, NASA, some say it stands for never a straight answer. I prefer to say not always a straight answer to give him credit for sometimes giving a straight answer. So I say not always. But when it comes to NASA and UFOs, there has to be a lot of lies going on. By the way, it's said that NASA is a government agency. It's not. It's actually private and receives government money. But that's kind of a side issue. For all intents and purposes, NASA and UFO is not a good combination, they would say, because they are going to hide the truth. So what kind of stuff is, well, first of all, who is Ted Buffington, and what kind of stuff will he be exposing in his presentation?
Yeah, and Ted goes on after the cocktail party and with the speakers. So we take a break after Jen, then we take an hour, and there's hors d'oeuvres, food, and there's a cash bar, and we mingle, and then we go back in for this presentation at 8:30 Friday night. And Ted is actually the Maryland MUFON State Director, and he works at NASA, and he's like an IT guy. So I don't think he's an NASA employee, but he's a contractor on the IT side, but he's been at NASA for years. And so he's the MUFON State Director. And, it's interesting you mentioned NASA is not really a government agency, it's private. Well, the reason they go private with a lot of these agencies, et cetera, and contractors is because Freedom of Information Acts, you can't compel them to give you anything when it's private because they got laws protecting them. So, and I know that's a reason a lot of this stuff, if you recovered a UFO, the government would give it to contractors to take apart, put together, and then you can't get that information from Tesla or General Motors, it used to be Bell Labs and those. So he's going to talk about NASA and UFOs, and I don't really know the extent of his presentation, but he is the Maryland MUFON State Director. I actually got him into MUFON when I met him at one of my conferences, and he was interested, and he told me his background, and I said, you got to join. So we got him to join the Maryland group, and he worked his way up, and probably a year ago they promoted him to the Maryland State Director.
Yeah, you said you really don't know much about his presentation, so you don't know if he's gonna. You said it's called NASA and UFOs, so you don't really know if he's gonna maybe digress from UFOs in the presentation to maybe speculate on something like secret bases on Mars or the Moon, or is he gonna try to maybe just stick with UFOs for the most part?
Yeah, I think it's going to be with UFOs, and I think, there's so much NASA footage out there on different, the space station photos that were taken, and, the rumors of NASA, scrubbing out their pictures and everything. You had Donna Hare and Johnson that time came forward and said that NASA routinely scrubs the photos. And, a question I want to ask him, is it true? Because I heard it was a couple of years ago, NASA said they were going to hold any pictures from space for 6 months before they released them. And that would give them time to scrub them of any structures and stuff like that. So, I think there'll be a lot of questions regarding NASA. But, he's not a NASA employee. He's a contractor. And I've seen him do presentations, and he'll do a real good job. He actually rides up on his Harley from D.C., and he'll come up Friday night and give his presentation.
Awesome. So the next speaker will be Richard Dolan. It's his title presentation here. It says UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. Interesting. He put the word mind at the end of he could have just called it UFOs for the 21st century, but he added the word mind at the end of his presentation. Well, first of all, introduce Richard Dolan. I'm sure he's definitely a household name in the world of UFOs, but for those that don't know, please introduce him, what he does, and this presentation. Tell us about what he's going to present, and also, like I said, I'm interested to know why he decided to call it UFOs for the 21st Century Mind and not just UFOs for the 21st century. What's the deal with the word mind there?
Yeah. Now, Richard, now we're talking about Saturday. We're into Saturday morning at 9 a.m. for the Saturday part of the conference. Now, I do want to add that Richard Dolan, myself, and Michael Bara, three of the 5 speakers during the Saturday day presentation, are members of the Hangar One UFO cast on the History Channel, so people will be able to get to meet 3 of us from the TV show. But Richard, his UFOs for the 21st Century Mind, that's I hate to say it's his latest book because he seems to pump out a lot of books, but last year this was the book he wrote, and it was the presentation he did up in Erie for us, the Erie MUFON Conference. And what he did was he tried to gear it towards young people. That's why he says for the 21st century mind, people that are growing up. I don't know what you call this generation right now, but, the under 25ers, let's say right now. So the cover of his book is kind of funky, pictures kind of sideways and stuff like that. He even mentions he got some criticism from the UFO community, but he said, look, I'm trying to make a hip, book cover that young people are going to read. And, and that's one of the problems we got in the UFO field is, anything you look at UFO related, you're going to see salt and pepper hair unless they're dyeing it. 2/3 of the people are really, over 45, over 50. Same thing for, MUFON members, any symposium, conference you go to, even the Hangar One TV show I'm in. I look at the ratings, and 900 of the 1.5 million, 900,000 of the 1.5 million are over 50, males over 50. So he tried to gear his book to younger people. And, if Richard had written 2 previous books that documented UFO history, each covered about 30 years each. So this one actually, at some point in there, picks up on the UFO history. I think he left off in 1977, so he probably ran this one from 77 to 2010 or 2005 as far as the UFO history goes. So, it's really a book geared towards younger people interested in the field. And Dolan, I consider one of the more intelligent people. I believe he's a Rhodes Scholar. I can't remember which college he went to, but, it's like Cambridge or Yale or one of those huge colleges, and he's actually now at, I don't know how old he is, 43, 45. He doesn't have another job. He does this full time like Stanton Friedman does. So whatever job he was working up in Rochester, I know he has left that, and he's doing this full time, radio shows, conferences, tours, books, the movie, TV shows, and stuff like that. So Richard is one of the best speakers out there. Probably, you'd probably talking of a Mensa guy with a very high IQ, and he makes a lot of sense, when he talks.
Indeed, he does. Although, just before we move on to the next speaker, one thing Richard Dolan said that some might disagree with, he called Project Blue Book a joke of an operation. I mean, maybe it was in regards to how seriously they took the UFO issue, but on the other hand, one might look at what Project Blue Book was doing and be able to deduce, okay, the fact that they were treating this as a joke of an operation, simply realizing that could have the potential to wake up a lot of people in regards to the whole UFO ET cover-up. So, just for the hell of it, I got to ask you, do you agree or disagree with Dolan's assertion that Project Blue Book was a joke of an operation?
Well, I think it depends on what side of the fence you're standing on. If you're a ufologist, Blue Book was a cover-up, so you call it a joke. If you're a government G-man, Blue Book was great. It was a complete cover-up. The CIA was entwined in it. They fooled everybody into believing they were looking at this for 17 years. They debunked the UFO phenomenon. They was full of CIA agents. The Robertson panel that they sponsored were scientists who were in bed with the CIA. So, Blue Book had a staff of 4 or 5 people. Of the 12,000, I don't remember what it was, 12,780 cases, they only investigated 59 that they actually sent people out to. 59. And still, they also had 701 that they claimed were unidentified, but they really only went out on 59. So, it depends on what side of the equation you're on. I know Blue Book was not a joke, but a very good intelligence scheme to kill the UFO, which is, what they tried to do. And, the very fact that 6 weeks before Blue Book reported, or 5 weeks before, General Bolender came out in October of '69 at the end of Blue Book, and he said, remember, UFO cases that involved national security did not go to Blue Book. They were investigated by the Air Force, and he gave you the 2 procedures, JANIP 146 and Air Force Procedure 5511, I think it was. But that was completely ignored. It's amazing. The general came out and told you the best cases didn't go to Blue Book. Cases involving national security were and still are, and now 50 years later, they are investigated by the Air Force if it involves national security. Like the UFOs over the nuclear bases, military bases, power plants, anything involving national security, the Air Force is right there to investigate. If the UFO's over my house, Air Force is not going to investigate that. But that was completely ignored And when they had the press conference with Dr. Condon, it's amazing. They worked it like Obamacare. They never gave anybody the Blue Book report to read until a couple of hours or the night before, at like 10 p.m. the night before. They gave the books out to the press and then said, don't worry about it. We're going to recap it in the morning. Nobody ever read it. So they believed whatever was said, and then years later, as people went through it and saw the proof and what they missed, and actually the cases they said were UFOs, but it was completely a scam, you know? That's my opinion.
Yeah, the phrase national security, there's a lot of eyebrow raising whenever you see that phrase nowadays. And I know you told me in my last interview you believe the government cares for us. Well, they do. I've no doubt they do. But at the same time, a lot of people that care for us don't really know what they're getting themselves into and who their higher ups are. So yes, the majority of people in the government do care for us, do believe national security is something to be taken seriously. But then again, there's a lot of brainwashing and compartmentalization. Just ask the Manhattan Project people. Need I say more? But one more thing, you did mention the word Janet. I just heard as a code name for something. It's interesting. That's also the name of the flights that take people into Area 51, I believe, and also. Digressing from UFOs for a moment, it has been rumored that former Attorney General Janet Reno and also former Director of the Department of Homeland Security Janet Napolitano are both men who had sex changes, if you could believe that, and their names are both Janet. Coincidentally, it seems like the name Janet not only pops up in UFOs, but also in regards to government women that used to be men. Not that it could just be a coincidence, but what is it about the name Janet? Because I swear that's I just heard you mention that name in regards to some name for something. Do you know what that's all about, or can you only speculate at this point?
Well, maybe they were in the Olympics, too, like, what's his name that had the change. But actually, I didn't say Janet. I said Janep, Janap.
My bad.
Which is Joint Army, Navy, Air Force Procedures. Janep. Yeah, not Janet. That's my New York accent.
Okay, that's cool. Enough of that. Let's move on. You will be presenting next in the conference, 10:30 on Saturday. This will be the case for UFOs. Well, that's such a broad title. The case for UFO. Well, the case for what specifically about UFOs? Please tell us.
Yeah. Well, actually, this is my new book that I just published. Just came out a couple of weeks ago, August 25th. It's called Case for UFOs, and I put 18 years of everything I know about this subject into this book. There's 111 photos, documents. There's 20 pages of quotes from all the famous people. There's a timeline. But I think the most important thing that's in the book, and which I'm going to talk about, in my presentation, is I have a chapter, I think it was chapter 2, that's called Do You Know, Should You Know? And that's a term when I was at UPS. I was head of public affairs for a couple of states, but, the meeting with congressional people. And our guy that headed that up would always say to us, do you know, should you know? He'd ask us questions about Congress, the Senate, the presidency. So I use that term. And in that chapter, this is all the little small things that most people don't know about the UFO field, and it's 254 bullet points, 2-3 sentences each, telling you things you don't know, that you never knew, but you should know if you're into this field. And, for example, everybody credits Kenneth Arnold with calling it a flying saucer. Everyone says Kenneth Arnold coined that term. He didn't. That term was coined in, I think it was 1878 in Dallas. You'll find it in the newspaper. The guy's name is Martin. I think it was John Martin. Saw a craft, and he called it, it looked like a flying saucer. So Arnold was not the first person to call it a flying saucer. And the chapter is just full of little-known facts. It's in chronological order, and different things that like the Reagan, his diary. He in his 1984 diary, he spoke of having a space capacity of 300 officers. And, actually nobody put that together with what Gary McKinnon said. I gave that to the Hangar One show, and they used it in the TV show last season. But, Gary McKinnon, when he broke into the Pentagon computers, he found that we had a space fleet. I don't remember how many vehicles he said, but there were 300 space officers, Project Solar Warden. So Reagan wanted us to know. So it's little facts like that that's in there. And if you read this, I even told Jan Harzan of MUFON that this should be required reading for all of our field investigators, new and old, because I'm meticulous with facts and details, and this is everything I know after 18 years, and I guarantee you if you read the book, and particularly that chapter, you will be astounded. I give presentations just on that chapter, and people run up to buy my book saying, I got to read this. So I'm the second speaker, and basically I'm going to run through the evidence, the proof that UFOs are real. And again, it's very logical. It's in order. Talk about presidents, talk about politicians, talk about, military witnesses, documents. And, by the time I'm done, it's very convincing that this is a real phenomenon.
Well, we need people like you to wake other people up. And speaking of which, let me just digress for just a moment from this conference into the last conference I was at. People, I'm sure, want to know. You mentioned Stan Freeman. He did have a mini heart attack. You said he was right back on his computer, like right after he was, even when he was in the hospital. I could be mistaken, either right after he got out of the hospital or even when he was in his hospital. He basically said, yo, give me my computer when he was on the hospital bed, and he started working. Yeah. And some people said he could have easily have made it to the conference, but his doctors would not let him, and they would have dragged his ass back into the hospital bed even if he tried to hop on a plane to the conference. So for all those people who are wondering, because he's over 80 years old now. He someone at him like has a heart attack. You have a reason to be worried. So for those that were kind of concerned about him, could you perhaps give us an update on how he's doing and what his future entails?
Yeah, I actually saw him this past weekend in California, and I asked him how his health is and everything. He says he feels fine. So he will be speaking at the Pittsburgh MUFON Conference in November of next year, 2016. So he looks fine. He looks like he may have lost a little bit of weight. And, he seems sharp and he's healthy, and we're going to bring him back out here to the Pittsburgh side to speak. I was trying to get him for this November, next month's conference, and, I think he said he was having computer problems and stuff. He never got my messages asking him to speak, but he said he'll definitely come out to Pittsburgh next year. So he's fine, and he's a very logical voice in the field and one of the better people to have to come see. And I know the public loves to see Stanton Friedman.
Yeah, I did have him as a guest on my show, the first part of the interview, after I spent about 15 minutes ranting about what happened to me when I was in Dallas for the 50th anniversary of the JFK assassination. I then let Stan on and let him bomb the floor for about 35-40 minutes to all but prove that there is a UFO ET cover-up with the government. The UFOs are powered by extraterrestrials and such. So by all means, check out my interview with Stan Freeman if anybody wants to learn about that. But we got to move on to this. Paula Harris, Back to the Future, Legacy of Giant Rock. Okay, Paola Harris, not a household name in the UFO field. I haven't seen that name much. Have I ever heard it at all? Well, maybe I have somewhere, but I don't remember off the top of my head. And Back to the Future, Legacy of Giant Rock. Are we talking about UFOs and time travel here, or am I getting ahead of myself? Who is she? What is her Back to the Future, Legacy of Giant Rock presentation entail? Enlighten us, please.
Yeah, it's not time travel or anything. I think Giant Rock is a location. I think it's out in Arizona or California. I actually wanted her to talk about exopolitics, but she says, "Oh no, this is my a better presentation," and so she's going to talk about it. But I mean, that's why I don't know the details from her presentation, but she is a big name. She's an Italian journalist, and I know overseas she's a huge name. When she speaks at different conferences, and the one thing in particular that I've seen of her on YouTube is an interview with Monsignor Balducci at the Vatican. I mean, she actually was the one who did the interview with him back in 2002 at the Vatican in Rome. She interviewed him about life in space and extraterrestrials, and he is involved with the Vatican Observatory, and he came out with statements that there is life in space. They are our brothers, and they have probably fallen from grace the same as we have, and that, God in all his eminency and power certainly created life elsewhere and not just here, which, is kind of like flies in the face of, Catholic doctrine that everything revolves around us here. But so he was, and he actually was not the first to say that. It was 1957, Father Connolly or O'Connell. It's in my book. I can't remember all their names, but Father O'Connell came out in 57 and said the same thing, and he was a Vatican spokesperson. So nobody's ever from the Vatican, the Pope, nobody's ever gone against what he said. And if anything, you see the church now is kind of moving in that direction. So I think they let him come out and say that in 2002. And Father Funes in 2008 said the same thing after Father Balducci passed away. But Paula Harris was the first person to interview, the Vatican on the subject of UFOs. And I think that's kind of groundbreaking that she found that out. And like I said, she runs actually the conference going on in November. I think it's the same weekend as my Pittsburgh conference. I don't think it's the one in the desert or Sky something, but it's a huge conference with about 30 speakers. It's in the old Laughlin, Nevada, where the International UFO Congress was. She runs that, and so she's in the field. She's well known. She runs that big conference, and she's had some major interviews, like with Father Balducci. So you always. A lot of times you get accused of where are the females in the lineup, with the speaker lineup. So a lot of times, so I have to be cognizant of making sure I get the big names like Linda Moulton Howe, Lynn Katai, others that we've brought into Philly, and Paul is one of them. We have Jen Stein also that's speaking.
Yeah, this Monsignor Balducci, was he known as Corrado Balducci? Was that his real first name? Corraldo?
Yeah, Monsignor Corraldo Balducci was his name.
Yeah, I think I once saw a picture of him and Zacharias Sitchin talking with each other when Sitchin was trying to find what there was a correlation between the planet Nibiru and maybe what the Vatican used to believe, but I'm only speculating on that one. But anyway, let's move on to the next speaker, Michael Bara, Ancient Aliens, the ET Question. I have seen every single episode of Ancient Aliens, and a lot of people would say the show is highly speculative and ridiculous. I mean, one of the seasons wasn't really that good because it seemed to be like a different version of everything they had talked about on previous seasons' episodes, but they actually changed that in the most recent seasons. They did try to get out a lot of new information instead of repeating stuff in a new style as they did before. I don't think there's any more new episodes scheduled at the moment. The most recent one was about crop circles. That was last week. But in regards to specifically, there's been lots of Ancient Aliens episodes, of course. What exactly in regards to the ET question, first of all, who is Michael Bara, and what specifically in regards to the ET question is he going to be discussing regarding Ancient Aliens? Yeah.
Mike worked in the aerospace field for years, and then he has left that, and he's done a number of shows like Ancient Aliens, but he was in Hangar 1, the UFO Files, with me. Matter of fact, he was there the day we were shooting. We were both there on the set. That's how I got to meet him and become friends with him and talk with him. So, I don't know the specific angle that he's talking about, but he's written books. I think that's the name of one of his books. So he's going to be talking about the ancient alien, information. He's not talking about Roswell and Rendlesham Forest and anything AD. I think he's talking BC as far as Ancient Aliens, which the show was geared towards. And I kind of agree with you. That show's been on 10 years now. I think they put out summer episodes, new ones, fall episodes. I don't, and a lot of it's regurgitated. So I'm still waiting to hear on Hangar 1. There's no word on season 3, and I thought Hangar 1 was not speculative and very informative and to the point and based on our real UFO files. So, and we don't have a word yet on season 3 yet. Ancient Alien's been on 10 years and they've done 200 episodes.
Yes, and I've seen them all. Although I must say, maybe I should go back and rewatch some of those episodes, because I remember when I first started watching that show. You said it's been on 10 years. Although the pilot episode, Cherries, Gods and Beyond, that I believe that aired in March 2009. So I don't mean to discredit you or anything for giving the wrong time period, but that was when the first show came out. And maybe if I were to rewatch some of those episodes, I would actually have a different perspective on it. I mean, for one, I used to think maybe the show was a bit of a disinformation campaign because they never really, among other things, talk about reptilian aliens. But when I saw the reptilian alien agenda episode as the pilot episode for one of the more recent seasons, that all changed. I wouldn't be saying that anymore. And it was funny. Giorgio Tsoukalos in that episode, he was like, I don't subscribe to the reptilian agenda. I think there's better ways to explain the situation that we are in on planet Earth than to say that we're a slave species to evil aliens. Well, I'm sorry, Georgia, that doesn't really explain why you don't subscribe to the agenda. So with all due respect, I think maybe he was in a little denial about his beliefs. But you know what? That's a subject for another show, another topic.
I did a conference with Giorgio and Van Daniken in 2012 in Minnesota. It was the first Ancient Alien conference. I was the only person that wasn't on the show that was there at that conference because I'm with MUFON. But I spoke at that conference, and Giorgio, he's different. He thinks he knows every answer, and even Van Daniken. He says he doesn't want a religion to come out of Ancient Aliens, but that's pretty much what they're preaching, is that, we were genetically engineered. And, I deliberately asked him a question about Jesus. Boy, did he go off. Jesus was just a man. Jesus was not the Son of God. He was just a prophet like Muhammad and Buddha. And and then afterwards he came back after the dinner break, and he says, let me clarify what I said. I don't think it went over all that great with the audience. But, if you watch the first 2 seasons of Ancient Aliens, and I own those on DVD, I think they were the best. Season 3, when they started talking about Da Vinci being an alien, that's where they lost me. And I haven't watched a lot of those episodes since then because I think they regurgitate and speculate way too much.
You're entitled to your own opinion on that one. Although, don't get me wrong, the show has the potential to wake a lot of people up who have an open mind, just like UFO Hunters and Hangar 1. But let's move on to the we got 2 more people to talk about, and then we have time left. There's a couple things I can ask you. First of all, Nick Pope, he's the next speaker. I remember asking Nick Pope over a year ago if he wanted to come on my show, and he said, I don't see myself doing radio in the foreseeable future. Well, now he was able to fly his butt all the way across the Atlantic Ocean to this conference. So if he can do that, I'm going to assume maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to get his mouth next to a microphone to come on my show. I'm going to ask him very nicely. I do have a lot of respect for the guy. Someone who is in the government is talking about this stuff deserves a lot of respect. This is the British government we're talking about here, and we're talking Rendlesham Forest Revelations. That's the title of his presentations, and I did talk about this in my interview with Linda Moulton Howe when I had her on my show. She tried to clarify the whole thing. Like Ancient Aliens, one of their flaws was what the whole thing regarding Rendlesham Forest, when they started talking about how the binary code that one of the witnesses obtained, like it pointed to High Brazil off the coast of Ireland, and she was like, no, and everybody's got this all confused. Ancient Aliens just arbitrarily pick that location, and then some people started, you're going to have to listen to my interview with Linda, but she did try to clarify that whole thing, and I'm glad she did, because a lot of people instantly assumed that binary code that they got from Rendlesham Forest pointed to High Brazil, when Linda made it clear that's not necessarily what it was pointing to at all. It's just that people confuse the issue because Ancient Aliens, they arbitrarily pick that. So, but anyway, let's get back to the subject of what Nick Pope's talking about. For those that aren't familiar with his work, he is a household name, but for those who don't know, please tell us who he is, what he does, and then tell us about what kind of revelations about the Rendlesham Forest incident he's going to be talking about.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the reasons he doesn't do radio when he does conferences is he gets paid to do the conference. So, I pay him a speaker fee, so he is coming and doing this. But, Nick Pope was actually the person that X-Files was based on. I never knew that. I learned it years ago. But when he had his basement office there at the Ministry of Defense in London, working on UFOs, that's the character they based Mulder on for the X-Files TV series. It was based on him. So that's a cool piece of trivia. And he's going to talk about Rendlesham Forest. I know he just put out last year, or about a year and a half ago, he put out a new book on Rendlesham. And it was a little controversial because I know Peter Robbins was very upset with that work, and him and Nick had a bit of a spat. And I know at the Erie conference I ran back in May of this year, Peter Robbins specifically asked to talk about his version of Rendlesham Forest and the investigation. So now you'll hear the Nick Pope version, with additional information from Peniston and the other officers involved. And, that one officer recently was given disability benefits from the military, and it pretty much, concluded that his UFO encounter caused his medical condition with his heart and everything, and he was allowed to get medical benefits. So that's huge as far as proving that Rendlesham was a real case. And, there are a lot of people that say the Rendlesham case is as more, if not more detailed than Roswell, and may have been the number one best case. Everybody right now will say it's Roswell as being number one, but, Rendlesham's right up there in the top three cases.
I could certainly believe that. It's preaching to the choir, but even to the people who consider it to be preaching to the choir, you can't just stop listening about it when you hear about it and never get bored no matter how much you hear about it. So definitely interested to hear what kind of stuff he has to say. Lastly, it says dinner, and is Dr. David Jacobs, well, who is he? Is he going to be speaking during the dinner or after the dinner? And he's going to be talking about abductions, and then after that, we'll be having question and answers with all speakers. Well, first of all, Dr. David Jacobs, abductions, the whole abductions, that's a very, very, very broad subject. Specifically, what is he going to try to be talking about in regards to that issue?
Yeah. Well, first we take probably about an hour and 15-minute break, and we have a really nice dinner buffet there at the conference. And then Dr. Jacobs will go on somewhere probably around 7:30ish or 8 o'clock, somewhere around there. Now, Dr. David Jacobs is a history professor at Temple University, which is not far there from the conference and in the Philly area. And he has written a number of books like The Threat and a number of other books. But he just came out with a new book, which I plan to get at the conference when I see him next weekend, talking about the abductions. And he has done about 800, maybe over 1,000, I think now, regressive hypnosis sessions with abductees. And I think it was about 200 or 300 abductees and about 1,000 sessions total. And what he did was he started documenting the differences, the similarities, and what makes him think it's an abduction, the odd questions like, why do you eat spaghetti with a fork but not soup? Things they don't understand that, you'd use a spoon. Why they put clothes on backwards, things like that. But I understand that his new book specifically talks about abductions have decreased the last few years, and it's because what he believes is they've been doing these hybridization program for years now, generation after generation, that they have alien hybrids that look just like us. They may only be 5% or 10% alien DNA, but they're still connected by telepathy with the aliens, that they can communicate and that they know that they're, alien and not human. And he says that they have infiltrated the government, corporations, etc. And this has been going on for, I think he identifies like 1870 something when it started. It's been going on enough now that there are, 5 generations, and they are clearly infiltrating. It's an interesting story. When I heard him speak the first time 10 years ago, it's really a scary presentation about what they're doing to people and their program. When they talk to these abductees, they say, everybody will have a position and you'll like your new job, and that they are here permanently. And that's, I said this at the MUFON Symposium when I got up last weekend and they were asking the cast of Hangar 1 questions. I said, there's 2 different versions of the abduction phenomenon. There's the metaphysical version that they're here to help. They're going to cure cancer and clean up the environment, and they're protecting us from Yellowstone and, Fukushima and all that. And then there's the other version that they're here, really to take over the planet and enslave human beings to, you'll have a degree of freedom in your house and your life, but you're going to work for them, and they will eventually be the people that are running corporations and governments and presidencies, and we're basically going to be that slave species working for them, like it or not. And that's the version that he has selected. And he's going to back it up, and I'm glad it's after dinner, so hopefully people can keep their food down. But it's a scary, scary version of what's going on, and he's got a lot of evidence to back it up. So it's actually the one presentation I absolutely want to hear, because I agree with a lot of what he says, and although you got the other version of the hybrids. I think the hybridization is going on, but I can't ignore the interdimensional theories of hybrids being born to prevent the return of Jesus, who would be someone coming to save us during the tribulation. And because that happened, with the Nephilim prior to the flood. So why do these have to be ETs from space, and why couldn't they be this malevolent beings from another dimension that we happen to call heaven and hell? I think that's part of it. And people laugh when I say that, but I say, there's a lot of evidence that that's true. And when you hybridize us, the same as 20 years from now, let's say we can genetically change humans. Are we still human? Would we still be in the image of our Creator if I have alien silk DNA woven into my skin so I can't get cut, or I have fish DNA in me that I'm impervious to cold and I can swim in the Arctic waters? So am I still a human at that point? So, those are all interesting questions. I'm actually going to do a conference on that type of stuff next year or the year after, probably the year after. I got a lineup of speakers for that. But Jacobs, to me, and there's a lot of people that complain about Jacobs because of his interviews with Emma Woods, and they thought he crossed the line on a lot of that questioning and his conclusions and all of that. But he's a controversial speaker, but there's so much of what he says is true. It's definitely something is going on, and he believes it's really a takeover of the planet by hybrid aliens.
Well, I'm going to come out and say that I subscribe to that too, although there is a little bit of a debate as to whether or not humans are neutral pawns in a battle between bad aliens that view us as cattle and good aliens who want to look out for the best of us. And then there's also those that say humans are actually, I don't know how I say this. There's different views on that, whether we're neutral pawns or whether we are actually in the same side, and we're not neutral, but on the same side as the good aliens, and we're battling the bad ones. It's we're definitely not on the same side as the bad ones, that's for sure. But whether we're neutral more towards the good ones, there's obviously a little bit of a debate there. But, of course, anybody who studied the work of David Icke is certainly very familiar with that. And, by the way, just want to get it out, he got the idea of the reptilian alien from Jordan Maxwell. So Jordan Maxwell is one who deserves a little credit in that issue. But anyway, I'm kind of digressing here. Let's talk about a different part of the conference, vendors. I remember at the last conference, last MUFON conference I was at, there were a lot of vendors that didn't just were not just UFO conference vendors. They were actually the type of vendors you would expect to find at a spirituality or metaphysics conference. And I guess it kind of makes sense because spirituality and metaphysics and UFOs and ETs go hand in hand and certainly do mix in many areas. So the kind of vendors that we're going to have, can you tell us a little bit about that, what we're going to see there?
Yeah, there are 14 vendor tables, and they're all full, and, half of them are the speakers at the conference. I think Tad is probably the only one who doesn't need a vendor table. All the other speakers will, so you got 7 of the 14. One I know is a ghost hunting group because some of their people are also members of MUFON as investigators, and they do a great job, and they have a table. And then you end up with, you have some that are, like you said, metaphysical table, other stuff. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the names of all the vendors and what exactly they're selling, but, I do the tables until we run out of tables, and I know how many I need for the speakers, so right now we're full, and so you'll have a nice array of vendor tables with different books and different information, ghosts, UFOs, metaphysical stuff. And, the vendor area, it's a real nice location there at the conference right outside of the theater where the speakers give their presentations. And we have that whole area for the vendor tables, which works out really good.
Awesome. Just so you know, we have about 9 minutes left on the live feed. There is a caller in the queue. He might just be listening, but let him talk. Area code 239. If you want to speak, you are on the air. What's your name? Where you're from? What's your question?
Hi, this is Diane. I'm in Southwest Florida. I'm just listening.
Oh, okay. Thanks for clarifying that, and thank you for listening. I love having more audience members.
Let me add something. I recently updated actually 3 of my 4 books that are out there. I have 4 current books for sale, and I put out Case for UFOs, which I told you is my presentation of all of the evidence. But what I did was I also reworked UFOs over Pennsylvania, which is obviously the big seller at my conferences. I took 100 pages out of it. It was 580 pages, and I took 100 pages out. I added 40 pages in. I put a chapter in there with recent cases, which were the close encounter of the 3rd and 4th kind cases in Pennsylvania over the last 18 months. There's other information in there, as a matter of fact, very important information that people will learn about shortly as far as a major case in the state. But it's in the book right now, so if anybody can get their hands on it, they'll see the book. That book was reworked, and then also the alternative history book. I did one more change on that and put that out. So really, all 3 of those books were redone. The alternative history book is a really cool book that talks about alternative theories to everything, how we got here, their involvement in our government, and it's all alternative theories. And the last book I have is Apophis 2029. That one's strictly a novel. And I personally think it's the best written book that I have. It's 400 pages. It's so fast-paced. I had one guy recently at the Kecksburg conference say to me he started reading it, and he said he couldn't put it down. He stayed up all night to read the book because it was so fast-paced. And, because it's a novel, it's like people, I don't want to buy a novel, but it's a really good book. But 3 of my 4 books that are currently out there right now were reworked. I'm not saying people have to go out and rebuy the books, but, Case for UFOs is new. And I've put out 4 books in 4 years, and they're all at my website, johnventre.com.
Thank you very much. Hope that encourages people to buy it. We have 6 minutes, 30 seconds left on the live feed. One thing I want to talk about regarding UFOs and the time we have left, when I was at the Mount Shasta conference that Rob Potter was heading, James Gilliland, one of the speakers at the conference, we looked up during the campfire that we had made. We saw what many people think are satellites in the sky when they see that, like a moving star, and someone says, oh, that's just a satellite. Well, no, satellites do not have a light source of their own, and that it's not like the sunlight will be able to reflect off of it for us to see. And one thing that led us to believe that those were definitely not satellites, we at one point saw one UFO, and then like a short way down the sky, another UFO, and they were both traveling at the same speed in the same line. The probability that these were satellites moving in sync with each other is like essentially zero. You're thinking it has to be some sort of extraterrestrial, for lack of a better phrase, technology that's moving across the sky, and they knew that we were down there trying to watch them. James Gilliland is an expert on, for all his purposes, calling UFOs at a UFO watch area for people to see them, and these two little dots in the sky that look like moving stars, definitely not spacecraft. Can you perhaps maybe speculate on what those UFOs are that we're seeing at all? I mean, if someone had a really big telescope and looked at that, what might they be looking at?
Well, the best thing to do is if anybody suspects that they're satellites, there are websites to go to. As a matter of fact, they're on our website, MUFONPA.com. If you look up top, I know it's on the right-hand side. I don't know if it's under training or links. One of them there lists about 8 websites to go to. One in particular has to do with satellites and maybe stellarium. And all you would have to do is go in and you put your location. I think you just put your zip code and the date and the time, and it will look and then tell you if a satellite passed at that time. So it would be a very easy exercise for somebody to do, and they really should have that available there on their laptop if they have any internet at that location. And so when people say they can look it up right then and say, look, no satellite passed over, or yeah, a satellite passed, an asteroid passed, a meteor passed. All of that stuff that's up there is in there, unless it's something unknown. So that's, without speculating, that's the best way to figure it out. I mean, that's what we do at MUFON. We get a case, and you tell me, I'll tell you what, the first time I saw anything in the sky, I thought it was a UFO. It was June 28th of 2008, and I said, wow, I saw my first UFO. I went to the website, looked it up. There it was. At 10:22 p.m. on June 28th, a small asteroid passed over zip code 15601. So I didn't see it. It was an asteroid, So that's the best way to figure it out, and it'll tell you if it's real or it's Memorex.
All right, time for one more question. It has been said that we are currently in a time of great metaphysical energy. Some people call it Wave X, where vast amounts of energy are emanating from the center of the galaxy to our part of the solar system. And the lunar eclipse we just had on the 27th of September, which went into the 28th of September in some time zones. That was a final eclipse in a tetrad, very significant astrologically speaking. Have any of your friends in the UFO ET community said anything about this Wave X energy that's coming towards the center of the galaxy and will be that is currently at its peak? Some say, well, actually, it's just past its peak because the peak was like the lunar eclipse. That's going to cause us to see some very significant things in the near future. Anybody said anything?
Yeah, it's funny. I got a lot of friends that are into the metaphysical, and they tell me, "Oh, yeah, that's their religion now, and this is what they believe." And there's other intelligences that are communicating or influencing things on this planet and everything. And and a lot of them made a lot of predictions for the end of September, and none of those predictions came true. I stay away from the metaphysical. I believe that there are interdimensional entities out there, some malevolent, some are trying to protect us. I believe that there is life in space. I believe it's abundant, and I know they've been here, and I think they still visit. And I can give you plenty of examples. And but I stay away from anything that's the telepathy side, the horoscopes, the Ouija cards, the Ouija boards, the tarot cards, anything that's trying to give me some sort of hidden knowledge. I question what the source of this knowledge is, and I think, just my personal opinion, you have to be firmly rooted in your belief with the good guys, meaning Jesus and Christianity, and that's just my opinion. People laugh at me when I say that, but I've had demonic stuff in my house, and the only way I got rid of it was, believing in Jesus and blessing the house and doing an exorcism right. So I stay away from the metaphysical because I don't know the source of this information that's trying to be passed on to us, and there's a lot of deception out there, and I think the deception's coming from the evil side. That's just my opinion.
And you're entitled to your own opinion, and you're entitled to your own research. Well, you say those things that people predicted never happened. Other people say, well, it did happen. It just happened in another dimension or timeline, and in the course of time, and emphasize time is an illusion, we will eventually see those things manifest in our reality. But again, that's speculation. I don't think we should really go there. So I would like to end the show because we only have 20 seconds left on the live feed. Anybody who's not listening in the queue is probably going to not be able to hear us shortly. So without further ado, I will bid you good day, John. I'll see you next Friday and Saturday, and maybe if you're doing another conference, we could do another preview show.
Yeah, absolutely. We got the November conference, in Pittsburgh, and, ask people to go to MUFONPA.com or JohnVentre.com. Thanks.
All right. Take care. Later.
Thanks.
All right, folks, that is the end of this preview of the conference show. Next Wednesday, I'll be having the E.T. Whisperer, Rob Gauthier. I'm not exactly sure how his last name pronounced. It's spelled Gauthier. Rob Gauthier. He was recommended to me by someone on Facebook, and I think he's a very interesting individual based on what I've seen. So Rob Gauthier, whatever his name is pronounced, I'll ask him for that pronunciation as soon as I let him on the air. Next Wednesday, the 7th, I believe it's the 7th of October. Yes, that is right. So this is Andrew Fisher signing off from Nature of Reality Radio. Namaste, everyone. Everybody who's going to the conference next week, enjoy it, and everybody else, enjoy the rest of your trek throughout infinite consciousness.